I'd like to call to order the annual meeting of the Board of Regents. And the first item on the agenda is accepting the dates for our meetings for the next year. So is there a motion to accept the meeting dates that are in your docket materials for next year? It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that we go with the dates that are in our docket materials for our meetings for next year. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, the motion carries. And I just want, Regent Simmons, I want to acknowledge, I believe you're on the phone.
Yes, I am, Regent Cohen. Thank you.
All right, good. So we have everyone present. All right, the next item on our agenda, on the annual meeting agenda, is the nominating committee report, election of board officers. And I want to call on the chair of the nominating committee, Clyde Allen, to please give that report.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I will say on behalf of the nominating committee, we appreciate you placing some confidence in us and asking us to do that. I also want to say thank you to Regents Frobenius and Omari for all of their hard work on the effort. We met in 3 separate meetings, the 10th, the 20th, and the 29th of May. They were open meetings, but we seem to be the only ones there. We followed the usual process. First of all, we looked at a long list of attributes that we thought were needed in chair and vice chair. Secondly, we looked at questions we wanted to ask all of the candidates. Thirdly, we sought nominations for suggestions of people to nominate. And then we interviewed, deliberated at length, sat on it for a while and deliberated again and made our final recommendations. I think you're all well aware of the qualifications of the candidates that we will recommend. If not, they're all available on the website of the board. But the committee recommends for chair, Rick Beeson, for vice chair, Dean Johnson, for secretary, Brian Steves, and for treasurer, Richard Fitzenreiter. And that concludes my report, and I place those names before you.
Thank you, Regent Allen. And thank you, Regent Frobenius and Regent Omari, for your work on the committee. And now I'd like to ask, are there any additional nominations for officer positions? Are there any additional nominations for officer positions?
Regent Cohen?
Yes, Regent Simmons.
Please help me with a point of order. Will we be voting on a motion that was just made by Regent Allen?
Yes, if there are further nominations, we'll vote a little differently than if there are not further nominations, then we will vote on the motion that's on the floor.
Then please give me direction, because I intend not to vote for the motion that's on the floor because I have concerns with the process. And since I have concerns with the process, I don't believe I have confidence in the outcome.
All right, yes. So I have heard no additional nominations, and so now I will call for the vote. Oh, yes.
You did not make it. No, I did not.
Oh, okay. Is there a motion?
Chair, I would move the election of the slate.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Regent Broad.
Madam Chair, I too, with Regent Beeson, with Regent Simmons, would hope that we can look at this process as we kind of move forward. I think that there's certain things that this board, I'm actually excited to work with this board on to alter some of our procedures to create a little bit more inclusivity in that process. So I know that Regent Beeson and Regent Johnson will, as well as you, Madam Chair, will be more than willing to look at alteration of these processes as we go forward, and engaging every member of the board in all sorts of ways, because we've got some great people that are on this board.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Chair, I would just like to comment that in the process, we did talk with each and every member of the board and a number of times with some of them.
Okay, thank you. Regent Larson?
I'm frankly rather disappointed and discouraged, not so much for myself personally as I am for the university, because I know most of the members of the board understand my background, but I think I need to reiterate. For many years, I was on the Cargill Board of Directors. It's one of the most largest and most complex organizations in the state of Minnesota. I was also on the 6-member corporate leadership team for a number of years. It's interesting that the 5 other members of the corporate leadership team all were mentored and supervised by me at one point in time in their career, starting with the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and the other 2 members. I don't know that anybody has had more experience developing people into significant leadership positions in a very, very large, complex organization, probably even larger and more complex than the University of Minnesota, and a totally global organization. So that concerns me that I didn't receive more consideration because of what I think I could have provided to both the president and the overall university. End of my comments.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Regent Allen.
Madam Chair, I do just want to comment on the fact that one of our problems as a nominating committee was that we did have very talented people to deal with. But I might also comment that one of the reasons we spent much time at the beginning looking at attributes and questions we wanted to ask of people was that we knew we would have a difficult time because we do have talented people. And it was one of the most difficult times we've had to decide which people fit best right at this time for the needs of the university. And that was how we came at it, and that was our deliberation throughout. That was one of the reasons why we came to some conclusions and then said, let's sit back and think if we've got the right conclusions that we're all comfortable with. And so we did go through a very deliberative process. It is the same process that's been used in past years. So that's about all I can say about it. It was a very thorough process, and I really appreciate the thoughts and questions raised by the other members of the committee as we went through it.
Okay. Regent Broad.
Madam Chair, and I won't, one last thing, and I appreciate, by the way, Madam Chair, I appreciate all of what you have done, I think, to encourage differences of opinion and encourage constructive operations of the board. I just really want to make sure that we don't view opposition to the slate as controversy, because I believe that these differences are healthy. I think it's important for this board to be very engaged and have those differences and be able to communicate those differences both in our votes and in our statements. And so I just want to thank you for having provided that opportunity. And I really hope that wherever people land on this vote, it's not a controversial thing. It's about we have different ideas of what this university needs at this time, and I think it's a good thing for all of us to be able to get to this place and cast our votes how we will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would add, it's not only is it not controversial, it's not also a reflection of lack of confidence in the leadership slate. It's about process and debate and discussion, and I echo what Regent Broad said.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we're ready to take a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
No.
Do we have the numbers? Mm-hmm. All right. The motion carries, and we have a new set of officers who will begin July 1. Congratulations, Regent Beeson and Regent Johnson. All right, if there's no other business, I will close the annual meeting. This is a nice, brief meeting. I wish our next one were quite so short. So the annual meeting is adjourned. Now I would like to call to order the regular meeting, the regular meeting of the Board of Regents on June 14th, 2013. And the first item on that agenda, President Kaler, is introductions and recognitions. President Kaler.
Thank you. Chair Cohen and members of the board, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our new Vice President for Equity and Diversity, Catrice Albert. Dr. Albert, would you please join me at the podium? Welcome. Catrice comes to us after being Vice Provost for Equity, Diversity, and Community Outreach at Louisiana State University. She earned her PhD in counseling psychology from Auburn University, which just so happens to be the alma mater of my younger son. And I also note that Dr. Albert is a native of New Roads, Louisiana. And you might expect me to say that with that foundation, we're confident that Catrice will bring us new roads towards improved equity and diversity at the University of Minnesota. Today is her first day on the job, and we are very excited for the vision and leadership she will bring to OED and to my senior leadership team. Catrice, welcome. Please say a few words.
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Regents, President Kaler, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. President Kaler has a very dynamic and exciting leadership team that I'm joining, and I'm happy to be here to move the diversity and equity vision forward and transform lives through the land-grant mission at the University of Minnesota. Thank you.
They'd like a picture. Good to have you.
Looks as though he wants to take a picture. Am I supposed to be up there with the picture?
It's really a great pleasure to introduce to you our new General Counsel, William Donahue. Bill is a familiar and trusted advisor here at the university, having served in our Office of General Counsel for 31 years and as Deputy General Counsel since 1996. I am absolutely delighted that Bill will bring his quiet but direct demeanor, his deep institutional memory, and his fantastic experience accompanied by a wry sense of humor to the leadership of our OGC. Bill, thank you, and please say a few words.
Let me do just a few quick thank yous. First, thank you to President Kaler for the trust and confidence he's shown in selecting me for this position. Thank you to the Board of Regents for voting to approve me and for your support throughout the years. And finally, I want to express a thank you to the people who work in the Office of General Counsel, who have for so many years made me and Mark look so good. Thank you. Now I get to shake everybody's hand.
President and CEO of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, Lisa Lewis. Lisa comes to us with 23 years of Alumni Association experience, most recently as Executive Director at the University of Connecticut. Welcome. Thank you. I'm confident that her proven track record and her creativity, coupled with her ability to push beyond traditional business models, will help us to advance the impact and the outreach of the UMAA. I look forward to the energy that Lisa will bring to our hundreds of thousands of Twin City alumni around the world. Lisa, welcome. Please say a few words.
Thank you, President Kaler. We are on the agenda in just a little while, so I'll be very brief, but it is truly an honor to be here. I have a true commitment and passion for higher education and the role that alumni can play in that. They are one of the largest and most passionate constituents and can really help advance an institution. I have been warmly welcomed in my second week on the job, and there is so much potential and opportunity, and I look forward to working with the Regents, the university leadership, and the alumni leadership to advance the institution. Thank you.
Good to hear. Thank you
very much. Just thrilled and honored.
Congrats.
Madam Chair and members of the board, we are next meant to recognize Amy Olson, who is the departing Civil Service Chair, but I do not see her here. And we will therefore do that at another time. Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Is there a motion to do that? A second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is a report from our president, President Kaler.
Madam Chair and members of the board, these meetings and the remaining days of June mark the end of 2 challenging, productive, and for me exhilarating years of working together with you and the entire university community. I have learned much from each of you during that span of time. One lesson is always to be thoughtful, sensitive, and careful, but direct in what you say and how you say it. Until recently, however, I had no idea that we also had to be mindful of what we are thinking. I learned last week that thoughts can trigger amazing things. Let me show you.
This is a quadcopter. The technology is amazing and flying them really is easy. Watch my hands. And now imagine flying one without them.
We may see a task like this as eye-hand coordination, but it isn't, not really. What's really happening is coordination between the brain and everything else.
We were the first to demonstrate this capability.
That capability? The quadcopter you see here is being controlled without hands, with a brain.
The subject is thinking.
University of Minnesota professor Ben He and his team have found a way to connect the brain to other things and control.
retirement from the spotlight of one of Minnesota's truly embraceable public figures, state economist and our own professor, Tom Stinson, who has performed a marvelous service to governors, legislators, and the general public for 26 years. Now, economists, you may know, are known to equivocate, arguing one position, but then sometimes saying, but on the other hand. That's why former President Harry Truman once angrily asked for a one-armed economist. So this being economics, well, Professor Stinson is stepping down. On the other hand, we are ushering in the era of a new state economist, our own applied economics professor, Laura Klomboukidis. She will be the first woman to hold that position in the state of Minnesota. I don't think we need to say too much more about our great outcome at the legislature. We took a giant step in renewing and building on our historic relationship with the state. We saw our first state funding increase in 6 years, our Minnesota undergraduate tuition frozen for the first time in a generation, and the state partnering with us on our MnDrive initiative. The UMF Heritage Society has received attention. Just like it comes from a humble woman who shared her college education. That marvelous gift is to the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences. I was saddened to learn also this month that Dean Al Levine has decided to step down from his leadership role. But indeed, the Atkins gift is a very high note on which the dean can exit. Yesterday, we learned about significant academic improvements in our Gopher Intercollegiate Athletics program. The NCAA reported that we have 5 athletic teams with perfect multi-year academic progress rates, or APR scores, and that 20 of our 25 teams maintained or improved year over year. The team that saw the biggest improvement was football, which set a program record. And I want to mention that our women's soccer team with its 4th straight season of a perfect APR. The APR allows the NCAA to take, quote, a real-time snapshot of each team's academic performance. Clearly, our entire program's academic performance is on the right path, and I congratulate our coaches, our staff at the McNamara Academic Center, but mostly our student athletes. Finally, later today, we're going to take a walk over to the Biomedical Discovery District and celebrate the opening of the 4th building on that remarkable public-private university partnership. I think that's a great way to end the academic year. Now, you know, I will be traveling to China and Taiwan later this month, my first international trip as president. It is a whirlwind 11 days that include a heavy schedule of meetings with government officials, high-ranking higher ed leaders, hundreds of alumni in 4 cities, potential donors, a group of honorary degree holders, business executives, and incoming students. This will kick off the 100th anniversary of the first Chinese students to graduate from the university, and it marks one of the longest and deepest relationships between China and any American university. In 2012, we hosted 2,483 students and 502 scholars and researchers from China. There are more than 8,000 proud university alumni in China, including the governor of the Central Bank of China. And we have more than 80 strategic partnerships with Chinese universities. That's what being a 21st century land-grant institution is all about. It's about engaging with the global economy to solve the world's most pressing problems, gathering with the global community to foster understanding and to enhance the economic vitality and brand of our university and our state. We expect academic discussions to focus on areas in which the university has particular expertise, including food safety, bioinformatics, green technology, marketing and finance, and tech transfer. I leave on the 23rd and return July 6th, and we'll report back to you on our work when we meet again at our next board meeting a few days after my return. So in closing, in the next 12 months, we will undoubtedly face important challenges, and we will need to make difficult decisions together. By this time next year, we will have completed a strategic planning process for the Twin Cities campus. We will have appointed a new dean of our medical school and vice president for health sciences. We will have hired a new dean for the largest college on our Twin Cities campus, the College of Liberal Arts, which I want to see flourish. And with Dean Levine's decision, we will have appointed a new dean at CFANS, a college with an important relationship with all 87 of our counties and a deep connection to our land-grant roots. As we've learned over the past 2 years on all of our campuses, we might just have a surprise or two along the way as well. So I thank you for a very successful 2012-13 academic year of achievement and advancement, and the participation of this board in that has been essential. With that, Madam Chair, I conclude my report and advise you that a memo detailing my accomplishments of the past year, I believe, has now been distributed to the board. Thank you again.
Thank you, President Kaler. And yes, it has been a very, very busy and productive 2 years, and we will hear a little bit more about that right now. Last month, I announced the appointment of the Presidential Performance Review Committee. And as outlined in board policy, the committee reviewed President Eric Kaler's performance for 2012-13. The committee consisted of my Chair, Linda Cohen, Vice Chair, David Larson, and Regent David McMillan. And we interviewed members of the Board of Regents, selected senior university leaders, representatives of faculty and student leadership, and external stakeholders. The committee also reviewed the President's report of accomplishments. And there were several non-public meetings of the committee, and the President joined the committee for the June 12, 2013 portion of its meeting. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to read the whole report, which is now being passed out, but I do want to emphasize just a couple things and read a small portion. President Kaler's second year of leadership at the University of Minnesota can be characterized as stellar. He has proven himself to be a bright, I'd add that to brilliant, capable, inclusive leader whose energy consistently impresses those around him. The President has brought a new, crisp decision-making style that has increased the pace of change within the university at a critical point in its history. Public research universities across the country are facing the dual challenges of constrained funding and increased demands for transparency and accountability. The University of Minnesota is no exception, which makes President Kaler's accomplishments over the past year even more noteworthy. He has continued to position this University of Minnesota as a top-tier public research university, which is essential to its future success. Thank you very, very much, President Kaler.
Thank you very much, Chair Cohen.
And that is the end of my report. I'll invite other members of the President Performance Committee to make remarks. Regent Larson.
Being that I participated in that and agreed 100%, I have really nothing to add other than to congratulate President Kaler on his very, very fine performance.
Okay, and Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have nothing of significant substance to add. The report speaks for itself, and we are richly blessed to have a leader of President Kaler and Karen Kaler's capabilities here helping us lead this institution.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd now like to receive and file reports, which is on your docket materials, pages 10 to 25. And then I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the consent report. Is there a second? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting the consent report, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the Faculty Consultative Committee, and I would like to invite Professor Sally Kolstad to the table to present her report.
President Cohen, Vice President Larson, members of the Board of Regents, and President Kaler, thank you for your time today. I report on behalf of the Faculty Consultative Committee. Literally hundreds of faculty members serve in governance throughout this university system, but few more faithfully than those elected to the FCC. My colleagues on this committee are deeply involved. They offer information, wit, and wisdom that enliven our discussions of often very knotty issues that we must wrestle to conclusion. My Vice Chair, Professor Michael Hancher, deserves special thanks for his insight and counsel, as do the Senate staff members who facilitate our work, particularly our FCC scribe and erstwhile historian, Gary Engstrand. Even as we finish this academic year, walking across campus, you will see newly admitted first-year students coming in for orientation. They populate the campus in clusters, concentrating on the commentary of their upper-class guides and looking somewhat wide-eyed at this large campus that will be their home for the next 4 years. The faculty is less visible. Many of us are now able to concentrate more fully on research as we hunker down in the libraries or our offices, as we work intently with undergraduate and graduate students in laboratories, or head off on research trips to geological field sites or specialized libraries around the globe. Other colleagues will use this time to work with K through 12 and other summer programs on campus, to work on community-based projects, to focus on developing new courses for the coming year, or to initiate research proposals. Some, of course, are teaching. My point is that while the rhythm changes, faculty engagement on this research university never stops. My written report to you focused on 3 ways in which faculty governance functions. First, reflecting the concerns and initiatives of faculty. Second, responding to the ever-changing landscapes of higher education in which we operate locally, nationally, and globally. And third, anticipating the future of teaching and knowledge building. I won't repeat myself here, but highlight 2 subjects of interest that concern us even as the recovering economy provides fresh vigor and momentum on campus. These 2 topics are faculty demographics and technological infrastructure that have become ever more essential to our classroom and intellectual work. First, the increased hiring of new junior and some senior faculty members this year refreshes our imagination and our academic activities. The data are not yet completely in, but I would particularly note the unprecedented achievement in hiring nearly equal numbers of women and men in the College of Science and Engineering this past year. At the same time, it was disappointing to learn that across campus, salary equity has not improved much since the study several years ago. In the coming year, FCC will work to get up-to-date and also retrospective data that will enable us to accurately gauge the relative numbers of tenure and tenure-track faculty in proportion to those who teach part-time or who teach regularly but without tenure, and also to track diversity in these results. The strength of a university is dependent on the faculty who are fully devoted to its comprehensive goals. It is essential that we maintain a strong cadre of such faculty. Technology is, of course, a necessity where human and financial resources are highly invested in the 21st century. With e-learning, wired and active classrooms, smart learning commons, digital repositories that store increasing quantities of new and sometimes old information, not to mention the real-time data that is transferred in networks across the campus, the necessity of building a physical infrastructure is critical. The Office of Information Technology is clearly working to keep pace with the changing technological landscape. But we urge careful attention to the distribution of the physical and instructional materials. It is critical to have timely on-campus instruction as new software, computer systems, and even hardware arrive on the scene with startling rapidity. This does require, I think, a new introduction that must be online and also individualized, and a rapid response advice available to the university community in order to take full advantage of enhanced technologies. The FCC and its committees will continue to work to enhance these possibilities. Some initiatives are ongoing. In a new model of collaboration, Provost Karen Hansen is appointing with the FCC a special committee on graduate education, and we expect to present at least a preliminary report by next December. The FCC is working to provide a set of guidelines and templates for college constitutions with the goal of updating these essential referential documents that help guide governance at the local level. In line with the challenges and opportunities of the digital revolution, I think we are on the verge of creating ever more open access to faculty publications and research results through our digital conservancy. Moreover, the Senate Consultative Committee has endorsed a recommendation to provide, wherever possible, more open access to text materials for classes. In conclusion, let me tell you that being chair of FCC has been a genuine pleasure, although a steep learning curve, as I engaged with a community of students, staff, and scholars who daily demonstrate a deep affection for and commitment to this university. Shared governance is built into our policies, but I was able to see it on a daily basis. Contact with Regents Cohen and Larson, attendance at your meetings, has demonstrated to me as well the deep interest that you have in our university and your commitment to the long-term strength of it. I particularly enjoyed a recent conversation with your new regents, Omari and Lucas, in an orientation session. President Kaler and Provost Hansen, now well past their inaugural year, have regularized governance contact and have been very open to unanticipated queries from us. Such availability on all sides is essential to shared governance. So with genuine optimism about the coming year, I commend to you my successor, recently elected FCC Chair Professor William Durfee, and Vice Chair Professor Rebecca Ropers-Hullman. I know you will work well with both of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kolstad, for your report and for your leadership this year. And will you please join President Kaler and me at the podium?
Following her final report, it is now my pleasure to honor Professor Sally Gregory Kolstad, the outgoing chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee, which serves as the executive committee of the Faculty Senate. Sally has been a truly wonderful partner this year. She's been a strong and steady leader as we celebrated together our important 100th anniversary of faculty governance at the university. Thank you, Professor Kolstad, for your excellent service as FCC chair. I have truly enjoyed the opportunity to work with you. Chair Cohen.
I'd like to read the certificate that Professor Kolstad is about to receive. The Regents of the University of Minnesota Certificate of Appreciation for Sally Gregory Kolstad. The Regents recognize with great appreciation the exceptional achievements and dedication of Professor Sally Gregory Kolstad, 2012-13, Chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Senate Consultative Committee. As chair during the University Senate's centennial year, Professor Kolstad has been an advocate for faculty while providing effective leadership in consultation with the President, senior leaders, and the Board of Regents. She guided the development of a new statement on the importance of faculty governance and was instrumental in leading faculty conversations on contextual grading, the structure of graduate education, the role of college constituents, and the implementation of a smoke-free campus. Most notably, Professor Kolstad provided significant leadership in celebrating the Senate centennial. The University of Minnesota has benefited greatly from Professor Kolstad's strong and steady leadership and is deeply grateful for her integrity, commitment, and contributions to the greater good. On behalf of the entire university community, the Regents of the University of Minnesota express their deepest gratitude to Professor Sally Gregory Kolstad for her outstanding accomplishments and for her remarkable dedication and service. Thank you so much. Yes. Oh. Okay, thanks. All right, now we are ready for the University of Minnesota Alumni Association Annual Report. And Kent Horsager, Ms. Lewis, and I don't know whether Susan Adams-Lloyd, yes, I see, she's coming. All three of you, please come to the table.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and good morning. My name is Kent Horsager. I'm a 1984 graduate of the University of Minnesota in Applied Economics, College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences, and happy to have joining us on behalf of the Alumni Association, Lisa Lewis, our new CEO, who you just met recently. We're thrilled about her joining us, and especially you will get to see this as you get to know her better, her passion for alumni and alumni relations. Also joining me this morning is Susan Adams-Lloyd. She is the chair-elect currently and will start her term July 1 of the, as chair of the National Board of Directors of the Alumni Association. Susan is a 1981 graduate of the University in Speech Communications, College of Liberal Arts. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some highlights this morning of our recent achievements, and then Lisa will talk a little bit about some of our aspirations for the upcoming year. We believe that the university's graduates are key stakeholders whose support and engagement is vital to the university's future. As alumni, we give our time in mentoring students, in advocating for the university, and even for some of us, as a number of you I know, and me, sending our children to the university. We currently have a sophomore, and that's a pleasure. Alumni also serve as ambassadors in our workplaces and communities to help the university achieve its goals. Alumni also provide financial support to the university, create endowments, fund scholarships, and provide excellence through philanthropic gifts. And our reach extends across the globe, with alumni living in every single one of the 87 counties in Minnesota, every single state of the 50 in the United States, and 170 countries in the world. Pretty amazing. We have 427,000 or so graduates of Twin Cities campus who live and work around the world, and we see increasing opportunities to engage them in the life of the university in a number of ways. I'd like to spend just a moment on our strategic plan. We're in the middle of a 5-year strategic plan, and what you see is a visual representation of the plan, which has 3 main pillars that serve to guide and connect our activities. First, engaging alumni in meaningful relationships with the university and also with each other. We also have, as one of the pillars, partnering. We have key partners around the university, including the colleges, the foundation, university relations, government relations, athletics, and student affairs. And we believe this is a really important pillar, and one that allows that in our view we can accomplish more by working together and partnering in helping alumni to find what their passion is about the university. We know that alumni can be some of the strongest ambassadors, and advocacy is another one of the pillars that we've established in our plan. Informed, engaged alumni will contribute to the reputation of the U as a remarkable place and support the welfare of the state. Quickly to touch on just a couple of accomplishments this past year. I think in your handout there may have been a longer list, but we, as we usually do, tried a couple of new things, and I'd just like to touch on those. In collaboration with the university relations, the foundation, and the president's office, we connected, I think, maybe the largest town hall meeting this year through a teleconference by connecting 60,000 alumni with President Kaler in a conference call. That was a new activity. We continue to tell the university's stories of alumni, students, and faculty achievement through the award-winning magazine, the Minnesota Magazine. We've also, through collaboration with university relations and a strong partnership there, we connect with about 215,000 alumni electronically, and we look forward to doing more in that area. That happens each quarter. We've also supported the university as vocal advocates during the legislative session, and one new activity that we tried this year was a legislative candidate survey, and we received over 100 responses to that. First time it was done, and overwhelming success, and that was sent out to all the in-state alums. In addition to that activity on the advocacy side, we hosted, along with government relations as a collaboration, the legislative briefing. There we had over 400 people gather and talk about legislative issues. But I think one of the things that was impressive is in those 400 people, we had over 75% of the legislative districts represented and hearing the story of the university. And now I'd like to turn it over to Lisa Lewis to talk a little bit about our aspirations for the upcoming year.
Thank you, Kent. The work that we do in the coming years is going to be built on the accomplishments of many, many talented alumni, staff members, university leaders, and campus partners, and the work that they've done over the past decade. They have built the foundation upon which we will grow. For example, this beautiful McNamara Alumni Center is a wonderful asset for the institution. And the recognition among university leaders, among campus partners, of the value of alumni and advancing the institution. So the assets are in place for us to increase alumni engagement and grow for the future. So in the context of the Alumni Association's current strategic plan, I'd like to share 3 goals going forward. One is that we want to continue to be alumni-centric in our philosophy and in our thinking, serving alumni on their terms. So that means that we want to ensure that our programs and services and communications are delivered to alumni with the right message and the right format and the right time in their medium. And that's something that we will focus on in the coming years. We're going to tap into the talent and the power of the alumni network to support students in their career aspirations. And in addition to that, build the career service opportunities and the network opportunities among the alumni body. We want to become known as the place where Gophers take care of Gophers. And then third, we want to continue to be a powerful partner with the university, encouraging alumni to advocate for the U, both as brand ambassadors for the university, in their communities, in the coffee houses, but also in the legislature. We want them to be vocal advocates. So it's going to take the collective action of all of us, the regents, our board of directors, alumni leaders, staff, and campus partners. Together, we can tap into that 427,000 alumni body and tap into their talent and their treasure and their assets to bring forth excellence for the university. And we're going to do that and focus on that over the coming years. So when a student graduates from the U, I think about them leaving with 2 important things. One, we want them to leave with a world-class education. That's already happening. Our outstanding faculty take care of that every single day. But 2, we want them to leave with a powerful alumni network where, again, Gophers take care of Gophers, and then Gophers take care of their university. And it's that second point where we will focus our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for your report. Are there any questions from the regents? If not, I want to say how much I personally have enjoyed working with the leadership, with Kent and Susan in the Alumni Association, and I know that the entire Board of Regents looks forward to working with all of you together as partners. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I might add my thanks to the group as well, and look forward to a terrific partnership going forward.
Now I'd like to call General Counsel Donahue. Please come to the table to present the annual review of the Code of Ethics.
Good morning. This is your annual review of the Code of Ethics. The policy that we are going to review is in your materials, starts at page 47, and you have required this review for yourselves annually by your policy. And the point is, of course, to remind yourselves of your commitment to conducting your work with integrity and to the highest ethical standards. In my view, you have done well at that, and this policy has worked well for you in terms of pointing you in that direction. What I'd like to do is to take just a few minutes to go through the policy. There will not be a quiz at the end, and you can, of course, ask questions either before, during, or after my brief presentation. The first section of the policy is Section 1, and it sets forth the most important principle, which is the principle that as a regent you are carrying out a public trust to govern one of Minnesota's most important institutions. That is what you commonly think of as your fiduciary responsibility to the people of the state of Minnesota. By virtue of that trust, you hold yourself accountable with respect to financial disclosures, gifts, expenses, conflicts, and agree not to use your positions of honor to solicit private financial, social, or political benefit. The second section defines the paramount interest, and paramount interest is important because it reminds you that the interest that you are representing is not one constituency, but the constituency of the entire University of Minnesota. The third principle is the commitment of time. I don't have to remind any of you of the large commitment of time that is required to be a regent at the University of Minnesota. Section 2 talks about financial disclosures. Each of you has made a financial disclosure. You're required to do that every year upon your appointment or by March 31st of each year. Section 3 deals with gifts. What it essentially says is that you shouldn't accept gifts except those authorized by policy. You have a separate policy on gifts, actually, and it all allows you to accept nominal things. It allows you to accept tickets, that kind of thing. What it prohibits is that it prohibits you receiving any gifts in connection with any matter that is before the Board of Regents. And that, I think, is probably the most important thing. Section 4 deals with expenses, and as you well know, you don't get compensated for all this work. And the fact is that you are entitled to your expenses, and you should apply for them and receive them. The Section 5 is definitions, and it's probably the most important section of the policy. It defines the two kinds of conflicts of interest that are important here. And the first is a financial conflict of interest. I'm going to just briefly read that to you. A financial conflict of interest exists whenever a regent's family member, and or a business associated with a regent or a regent's family member has an actual or a potential financial interest or other interest in a matter pending before the Board of Regents that may impair independence of judgment or objectivity in the discharge of the regent's public governance responsibilities. What's important about that is that if you own a business and that business has a contract before the board, you shouldn't participate in the consideration of that. The second conflict that's defined is in subdivision 6, and it's employment-related conflicts of interest, and it says an employment-related conflict of interest exists whenever a regent's employment relationship may impair independence of judgment. So if you work for a company that has a contract before the board, you shouldn't participate in the consideration or the vote with respect to that contract. Section 6 deals with how do you actually deal with conflicts of interest. It tells you what you should do, and the conflicts, I want to remind you, they're just inevitable. It is, in fact, the fact that you participate in the community, it is that you're heavily involved in your community that creates conflicts. It is not an embarrassment. It is not something that you should try to not simply bring forward because you're worried about it. It is, I think, part of the reason you got elected regents is because you are so heavily involved in your community. And what the policy tells you is that in the first instance, you are the person who decides whether or not there's a conflict. And what you should do is if you decide you have a conflict and you think that that's the case, you should recuse yourself from participation in the consideration of that matter before the committee or board that you are on. And the way you can effectively do that is to tell the chair of the committee that you do have a conflict, have the chair note the conflict in the committee's minutes, and then not participate in the discussion of the contract or the matter and not vote on the matter. What we recommend to people is that they simply leave the room so that there's no question that you have not participated in the vote or the discussion, and that has worked well. If in fact you have doubt about whether or not you have a conflict, the policy invites you to come meet with the General Counsel. Mark Rotenberg and I have done that on several occasions with regents, and we will give you advice, and in cases of dispute, we will actually issue an opinion with respect to whether or not we think a conflict of interest exists. And if there is a dispute, the chair can, of course, as many of you know, appoint a committee. The committee can then consider that dispute, make a recommendation to the board. The full board is the final decider of whether or not a conflict of interest actually exists. The last three provisions in the policy, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Section 7 talks about candidacy. If you decide to run for public office and you announce your candidacy, you are required to resign from the board. And Section 8 talks about employment, and what it says that if a regent shall not serve as a compensated university employee except for the student regent who is allowed to hold student employment at the University of Minnesota. So that completes my review for you. I'm more than happy to talk with you about it today, or if you would like, talk to any of you privately at virtually any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Are there any questions or comments? All right. If not, we appreciate that, and we know that you are available if any of us have any questions about conflicts of interest, or any other items on that in that area. All right. We are now on to the President's recommended 6-year capital improvement plan. And President Kaler, I hand it over to you for some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring forward for your action my 6-year capital improvement plan. As you know, the legislature did not fund our HEPA request, and a bonding bill for the EU did not advance. So there are some changes to what we had previously proposed at our May board meeting. Still, this plan includes our commitment to renewal of our 29 million square feet of space across the system and to some major strategic opportunities. For details, I will turn this presentation over to Vice Presidents Fitzenreiter and Wheelock, please.
All right, Vice Presidents.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Before you today, we have 2 items, the first of which is the 6-year capital plan. It has been presented in both the Finance and Facility and Operations Committees and has been subject to their review. And the first part is really a slide just to differentiate between the two. Part 1 is the annual capital improvement budget that will be coming up next. These are the projects that are ready to move forward and we're going to advance in the next fiscal year. This is really our prospective plan for improvements in facilities moving forward through 2019. There are a number of considerations that go into the development of the 6-year capital plan. This is intended to reflect our strategic priorities as it relates to facility improvements, but obviously, in addition to kind of the relationship with the academic mission, there are a number of issues about the readiness of the project to be moving forward, the potential for sequencing projects and understanding where this is relative to future investments and the priority around timing, the financing plan, and geographic distribution, given that we are a statewide system. We have reviewed this in May. It was presented for review in May. We are asking for action in June. There have been some changes since the May presentation. Obviously, the biggest is the fact that, unlike our assumption when we developed the proposed plan in May, there was no bonding bill, there was no appropriation by the state for projects. So a number of projects have been reassigned to 2014. We have also moved forward a UMD academic priority project from 2016 to 2014 and have been meeting with the representatives of the campus and the chancellor to talk about defining the nature of that project and moving that forward. As you know, we had requested design funds for both the Tate Laboratory renovation and the St. Paul Laboratory project in the 2013 bill with the anticipation that we would ask for construction funding in 2014. We're now asking for full project funding in 2014. And then an investment in recreational facilities on the Twin Cities campus on the West Bank was added to 2015. We have a number of projects that are under consideration, and there has been some change to that as well. Each of these projects are there for a reason. The reason may not be the same for each of these projects, but these are projects that have been designated as institutional priorities, but there's either some question about the programmatic scope, the timing of those projects, or funding that needs to be better identified, or funding feasibility determined. So those list of projects can be considered as likely to occur during the 6-year capital plan horizon. Specifically, we made some changes to that list. Eddie Hall, which was on the 2013 legislative request, is now on this list. It is a priority for the institution to renovate and improve the functionality of the oldest facility on the East Bank campus, but we're going to continue to look at the appropriate way, the most strategic way to get that financed, and also the end use of that facility. So that is a priority, but it's been placed on that list at this point in time. The Kirby Student Center project at UMD was renamed as the Student Life Priority. We're going to continue to work with UMD to scope that project and determine impact on student fees and the appropriate use of the space. The Academic Health Center Interprofessional Education Center had, under the previous 6-year plan, been noted under 2018 as a renovation of Deal Hall. At the President's direction, we're actually moving that up as a higher priority, particularly given the interest both at the institution and with policymakers external to the institution to improve our medical education standing, and in light of the fact that we are currently recruiting for a Dean of Medicine and a VP of Health sciences. The institution wants to have a better framework about how we're going to make that investment, what facilities are included, and what programmatic improvements need to be made. The Bell Museum was not funded this year. We certainly understand that's an important institutional asset and needs some investment strategy, but both the timing of that investment strategy and the particular strategic end use need to be further examined. And as the board knows, next month the athletic director is going to come and talk about the vision for athletics. Part of that will also be sharing a sense of priorities around physical improvements or facility improvements to support those athletic goals.
Madam Chair, the total investment plan here for the 6-year capital plan is just slightly over $1 billion. You can see in this chart that it is, of course, always heavily reliant on state contribution. 77% of the plan ties back to the state of Minnesota. The $200 million under the U of M contribution is our 1/3 share of the projects that we would advance in this plan to the state. And then there is $33 million of some U of M self-funded projects. This was the financial plan around the 6-year plan was reviewed yesterday in the Finance Committee of the board.
The next steps of the 2013 legislative session, we know that did not appropriate any funds for capital projects. There is a preliminary submittal due to the state, the Minnesota Department of Management and Budget later this month. We will use the 2014 capital plan that's laid out in the 6-year capital plan as our preliminary request guideline. Many site visits are conducted by legislative staff and legislators during the months of the summer and early fall. We will be back to the board and the appropriate committees to ask them to review a resolution and adopt a resolution to finalize our formal request for the 2014 legislative session, probably in the September-October cycle. And Madam Chair, before you then would be the resolution that we would ask for board consideration.
All right. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Regent Johnson to report that his committee had gone over the recommendations, and I believe you're going to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Madam Chair, members of the board, President Kaler, yes, the Facilities and Operations Committee spent considerable time yesterday hearing the presentation from Vice President Wheelock and staff. I think the priorities that are reordered are certainly appropriate, and President Kaler, I think, shouldn't speak for him, but agrees to these priorities. And at this time, I would move the 6-year capital improvement plan resolution, Madam Chair.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Regent Frobenius because the Finance Committee also had a discussion, and we'd like to hear their recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee did review the financial aspects of the 6-year capital plan and is recommending approval of the President's recommended 6-year capital improvement plan. The financial expenditures contemplated within this plan maintain our current excellent debt ratios and would maintain our excellent debt rating by the rating agencies, and is within the debt capacity of the university.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from Regents? Regent Broad.
Chair, and I just wanted to congratulate the President and Vice President Wheelock and Fitzenreiter for a good plan. I think this plan is relatively affordable relative to the debt service, which is always something that I look at. I think it's a good menu of requests and a list for us to send to the legislature. And I also just wanted to point out that as a member of the Facilities Committee, I'm especially excited to see the capital plan, but a strategic facilities plan that I know the President is working on alongside of Vice President Wheelock and Fitzenreiter to give us a improved strategic picture of where we're going as a university relative to our facilities. And so I just wanted to thank the President and everybody that is working on that plan, because I think that's going to be a really important thing for us to figure out where we're going and how we get there.
Okay. Regent Omari.
Congratulations, and also point out the strategic initiative to focus on mission when we're talking about facilities, and I know that's a big thing that President Kaler and Vice President Wheelock have been trying to do. So in this tough time of facilities and building management, making sure that we maintain a focus on our mission is laudable. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Regent Simmons, I just want to make sure, if you're still there, I'm not sure, but if you have something to say, please be sure you let me know.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I am still here, and I'm following on live streaming as well as the phone, so I'm engaged.
All right, great. So please let me know if you have some comments.
Thank you. No, I have nothing to add to what others have said, and I agree.
Okay, so now we will vote on the 6-year capital plan. There's been a motion made and seconded, and since there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion carries. And now I believe we will move on to the fiscal year 2014 annual capital improvement plan and budget. All right, Vice Presidents Wheelock and Fitzenreiter, I think you're on again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned, this is for projects that will be moving forward during the next fiscal year, and this complements then the 6-year capital plan. Many of these projects have been in prior 6-year capital plans and will be very familiar to you, but there's a level of detail that is involved here to meet Regents policy. These are individual projects that are over $500,000. The projects need to have a completed pre-design to be in the annual capital budget. The projects need to be fully funded, and this is also then a mechanism by which we authorize projects to move forward into design and/or construction. There, as with the annual capital plan as well, there have been changes since May. We have removed all of the items that were in the 2013 legislative request where we anticipated funding and the ability to move forward in 2014, but we have also added a number of projects. And I'll get into more detail on the next slide about the projects that we have added and the dollar amounts that are associated with them. You can see the result of these changes is a significant reduction in our annual capital budget, specifically due to the lack of a bonding bill that appropriated funds for the University of Minnesota. Where we did add projects, the Minnesota Vikings projects, the improvements at TCF Stadium. This is an estimate for those improvements. They need to be further refined in consultation with the Vikings as well. But all of the improvements that are necessary to facilitate the play of the Minnesota Vikings under the lease agreement are the financial responsibility of the Minnesota Vikings, as well as the restoration of the turf so it meets the Gophers' needs at the end of the use agreement. So this is an estimate that will be refined, but those will move forward. The Facilities and Operations Committee yesterday heard about the updates for the improvements at Glen Sheen that will restore certain elements of the physical plant as a result of the flood damage that occurred just roughly a year ago at this time. We're improving a floor at the Variety Club Research Center for the use by the Department of Medicine, and we are also adding funds to the microbiology facility in the Biodiscovery District, which is one of the 4 projects that was authorized with special funding and support from the state of Minnesota and can only be used on those 4 projects. So we're closing out the cardio cancer project and moving any remaining available funds to the microbiology project. Engineering and fisheries, this is the aquatic invasive species research that is conducted at the St. Paul campus of the U of M. This is funding that was received in a grant. The priority is to improve or construct a new well, and that will begin shortly. And then $500,000 improvements. This is related to improvements necessary for the U-Market or the e-procurement initiative, which was recently heard in the Finance Committee of the Board of Regents, and to allow for really the receipt and distribution of those items.
Madam Chair, this particular slide shows you generally the source of funds for the $110 million 2014 capital improvement budget. You, of course, see that the plan, as my colleague has mentioned, there are no state funds state debt supporting this proposal. It is $110 million for fiscal 2014.
Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation, and we would ask for consideration of the resolution to approve the annual capital budget.
Okay, thank you very much. President Kaler, do you have anything to add to that at the moment?
Madam Chair, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Then Regent Johnson, would you tell us the recommendation of your committee and propose a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Again, we spent some time talking on the capital budget resolution, and I want to pay public compliments to Vice President Wheelock and her staff for excellent work and information that she provides to members of the committee. And with that, Madam Chair and members, I'd move the resolution 2014 capital budget resolution be adopted.
Okay, and is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and now I'd like to call on Regent Frobenius to hear what the Finance Committee had to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee did review the financial aspects of the $110 million plan. The plans for funding are all acceptable. The portion that impacts our debt is consistent with our current debt ratio, continues to maintain our debt cushion, or our cushion within that ratio, and is the debt service is within our budget constraints for debt service. So our committee does recommend that plan to the Board of Regents.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded to accept this resolution. Is there any further discussion by the board? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have a capital budget resolution. And now, moving on to another budget, we will move to the fiscal year 2014 annual operating budget. And Vice President Fitzenreiter, you may want to remain at the table, or you're coming back, okay. And President Kaler, we reviewed this budget on June 5th, and would you like to add some highlights before we hear the Finance Committee's recommendation?
Madam Chair and members of the board, it's now really a great pleasure for me to present to you for approval the university's fiscal year 2014 operating budget. You heard this budget last week, and we also had a public hearing in which we heard from a wide range of witnesses. This budget highlights our priorities, my priorities of excellence and access, and of serving as Minnesota's only comprehensive world-class research university. The budget I share with you today reflects three goals: a deep commitment to an exceptional and an affordable education, and both of those words are important; a passion for excellence in research and innovation to improve lives; and being an exceptional steward of all of our resources, public and private, through redirecting our expenses and the program of operational excellence. This budget and the state's renewed investment in our students, faculty, research, and public engagement work is a huge accomplishment. Here is a picture of the 16-year-long roller coaster ride of state investment in the university, a bumpy journey that begins on this chart at the start of the 21st century. This is a track of the state appropriation by year. The journey saw the state disinvest in us during 7 of those years. And as you can see, this year's state investment is the first appropriations increase in 6 years. As we have discussed before, our approach to the legislature and the governor for this biennium was different from years past. We told them what we're going to do with their investment. Fundamentally, we sought to renew the historic partnership between our university and the state, a partnership that has become frayed over the past decade. I'm proud that together we took a giant step in strengthening that relationship. With new state investment, the budget advances the 2 key principles that we sought when our process began almost a year ago. First, to use the new state investment to stabilize tuition for Minnesota resident undergraduates for 2 years. And second, to make targeted strategic new investments in university research and innovation that will contribute to Minnesota's economy and growth through the MnDRIVE initiative. The hallmark of this budget is our commitment to affordability and access for Minnesota resident undergraduate students, and our further commitment to limiting the increase in fees for all of our students, graduate and undergraduate. I think you can bump a slide, Fitz, for me. Thank you. To these ends, this budget includes freezing tuition for resident undergraduates for 2 years, holding campus and collegiate fees flat for the first time in decades, holding resident undergraduate tuition and required fees to the lowest increases in recent history. Crookston down 0.1%, Duluth up 0.2, Morris up 0.3, and the Twin Cities up 0.7%. We're also keeping increased need-based aid and keeping graduate and professional tuition aligned with market conditions and peer institutions. The other key element of this budget is its investment in research and innovation. The University of Minnesota has a unique and singular role as the state's only comprehensive research university, and this new investment will ensure our state and our industries benefit from the intellectual fruits of this amazing place. The Minnesota Discovery Research and Innovation Economy, MnDRIVE, is a new program in state law. The purpose is to discover new knowledge, to advance Minnesota's economy, to seize opportunities to leverage our strengths and advantages, improve our health and quality of life, advance the capacity and competitiveness of Minnesota industries, and position our state as a leader in key areas. 2014 appropriation includes research in 4 interdisciplinary areas: robotics, sensors, and advanced manufacturing, food safety, advancing water technologies, and advancing treatments for brain condition. Legislature has awarded the university $17.8 million in new recurring state appropriations for this innovative program. Our initial projection is that there will be more than 50 new faculty positions created and more than 70 graduate student and fellowship positions. We'll hire laboratory personnel and we'll purchase specialized equipment. The state's overall funding investment in this biennium will also support critical needs to maintain excellence across the system, including world-class faculty hires in many targeted areas. Of course, with state investment comes our commitment to reduce administrative costs. Biennial budget framework we proposed and this board approved as part of our legislative request last fall included redirecting $14 million of existing resources to our core mission over each of the next 2 years. This FY14 budget recommendation actually exceeds that goal and includes $19.7 million in redirected resources and cost reductions. In addition, this session, the legislature wrote into statute a metric to reduce our administrative expenses by $15 million in FY14. The currently identified $19.7 million in reallocation already includes $10 million of reduced administrative costs. We're confident that we will identify an additional $5 million and meet the legislative expectation. Operational excellence remains a top priority, and we will continue to work hard to reduce administrative costs for the benefit of our students. Let me give you some budgetary context. Here is a look at all of our sources of revenue, and it graphically illustrates just how much tuition funds considerably outpace state support and are just above every other revenue category. In closing, I would want to point out an important fact, that while this is our 2014 operating budget, your resolution today will also freeze Minnesota undergraduate resident tuition for the 2014-15 academic year. So today, with your approval, we will make a bold 2-year commitment to affordability and accessibility. It's a historic foundation upon which I want to build. Our partners in this freeze are our legislators, particularly Senator Bonoff and Representative Pawlowski, Governor Dayton, and the citizens of our state. And I thank them and I thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, I'm proud of this budget. It reflects our key shared priorities. It provides enormous cost relief to our students. It makes critical targeted investments, elevates our research enterprise, and it advances operational excellence. I seek your approval for the resolution before you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am open to questions, and Vice President Fitzenreiter will be available as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I want to call on Regent Frobenius to give us the Finance Committee's recommendation and make a motion about the budget resolution. Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will, at the end of my comments, make report to you the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to the board to approve the recommended 2014 annual operating budget. We did, during our meeting yesterday and in preparation for our meeting, take a deeper dive into the budget with a variety of other aspects that are not presented necessarily to the entire board today. We debated certain aspects of graduate school tuition. Particularly, we reviewed undergraduate tuition on all campuses for the net total expenses at different family levels and family income levels. We reviewed the compensation budget proposed increases and the need for that, the reallocation of funds described by the President, the both known and yet to be determined cost reduction commitments, and a number of other aspects that you don't want me to bore you with today, but we took a pretty deep dive into this. This is a very well put together budget. We are highly appreciative of the support that the state has and confidence the state has placed in the university and the responsibilities that are placed within the university for continuing our good operation of this. And we believe that we commend the president for an outstanding budget process this year, and we do recommend unanimously to approve the recommended annual operating budget. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move its approval.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and now I'd like to open up for discussion. Are there comments, questions from any members of the board? Regent Devine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to recognize formally the work that's gone into the budget to put it together this past few months, and to all the effort that went in on behalf of the staff to assemble the numbers and bring us this budget proposal today. I would also like to note that, the collaboration that's gone on between the legislature, between the staff, the Office of the President, to assemble this budget really has moved forward to reach the desires, I think, outlined at least a year ago by the Board of Regents, and take on the efforts of really addressing what needed to maybe be done to signal to the people, the parents, the students, and the people in Minnesota what had to be done relative to helping to hold the costs. And then finally, I'd like to make note that President Kaler, I certainly appreciate all the effort that's gone into this budget and the preparation of it, and the work that you've done with the legislature to bring about this tuition freeze and the holding of the costs. I think it's appreciated by certainly the board, but it's certainly appreciated much broadly by the faculty, the staff, the students, and the people of Minnesota. I wholeheartedly support the budget, and I thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I intend to support the budget fundamentally, strategically, directionally. It's a good budget, and echo some of Regent Devine's comments in that regard. I do want to, though, express considerable and ongoing concern about some of the professional graduate school tuition issues, business strategies, the business models there. This is wonderful for undergraduate, but it doesn't address some of the issues at the professional graduate level, especially law. We raised a couple of those back on June 5th, Regent Frobenius, and I did as well. So I just want to make that note. It doesn't rise to the level where I'm going to vote against the budget, but those are significant, and we need to get our arms around where we're going especially in law, where you've got a grossly oversupplied marketplace, and we need to maintain rankings, but I do not support the strategy we're embarked upon now, and I'm going to keep my eye on that over time.
Okay. President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, Regent McMillan. To my view, there are really two areas that we need considerable more work on. And it is, I've been here 2 years, which is 2 years, and we haven't quite got everything done yet. And those two are fees, undergraduate and graduate fees. We need to continue to look carefully at them. Vice President Fitzenreiter and his staff have been running combs through those. I think they're important to understand. They're important for us to be able to communicate what they're for and where they go. And the second is where we are in graduate and professional education. We have bent the curve in many places. The medical school tuition, for example, is going up 2% this year. The law school model is one in which it's called a high tuition, high aid model. And while the list price has increased, the net price increase over the past several years has been in the 2 to 3% range. One can have a philosophical discussion about the concept of a high tuition, high aid model, and people can agree to disagree about that. It is an interesting phenomenon that in the law school markets there is a positioning around list price. Our law school faculty and leadership are in that world and feel strongly that this is the best way to position the University of Minnesota, and to use financial aid to both shape the class and maintain the LSAT levels that we need. But again, it's a conversation that's very much worth having, and I look forward to doing that over the coming year.
Regent Frobenius, you have a follow-up comment.
Thanks. I wanted to Madam Chair, I wanted to comment in light of Regent McMillan's questions and comments. I'm speaking more now as an individual regent than I am as chair of the Finance Committee, but I do concur with his thoughts that the law school is an area that at least we should have some continuing discussion on the model and possibly the philosophical discussion, and I'm somewhat assured that that discussion will occur. I do want to clarify also a point about the medical school budget tuitions that I raised. We actually have a program within the medical school where the number you come in at is the number you pay for your period of time per year in the medical school. So even though there are, on the schedule that's shown, there are some higher percentages, the only real number that we have control of in this budget setting is the 2%, or is the first year incoming student number, which is a 2% increase in budget, and that will carry forward for the 4 years for those students. So my concerns were that there are still humongous issues on how this university continues to finance medical education in the light of a variety of other trends going on, but the tuition charge is consistent and reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Regent Beeson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo the comments of my colleagues. The other area that jumps out to me is the general balance of the budget, namely investments. If all we do is focus on cost reductions, and it is consuming us, and it needs to be a dominant theme, but if that's all we do, we will not succeed in elevating this university. So seeing a program like MnDrive, seeing line item investments that go into our depreciating assets, into our departments where there's opportunities, where there's strengths, it's really important for us to spend as much time as we can about investments of people and equipment and buildings. And I'm glad to see we've found room in the budget to talk about that and to have that show up in some of the numbers. So thank you for the balance, and I will support the budget.
Regent Broad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I had supported the approach. I think, President Kaler, you had a very creative approach with this budget relative to how we went out to our partners in the legislature, and I think it was proven to be effective in terms of those smart investments on priorities. So I think that approach was spot on. And just to be very clear, I really supported the concept of a very distinguished and determined tuition freeze. I thought that showed a very strong commitment of the university to our students and to the families who are struggling to afford school. I also strongly support some of the internal administrative reductions that you're taking in a not across the board way, but a very tactical way. And I look forward to a number more of that, because I think that was a good start. And I know that you are well on your way to finding additional savings and additional reorganizations, I think, in this university that will be beneficial long term. I do have some lingering concerns, however, over the sustainability of the model. And I think, President Kaler, I appreciate that you are going to take a look at that sustainability of the model. The high tuition, high aid model, which is effectively expanded in this budget, is concerning to me. I feel like we shouldn't have a Kelley Blue Book for tuition. We should know what it costs and be able to have students know what it costs to them. And I worry a little bit about high tuition, high aid in general. I also, have a lingering concern over whether our tuition freeze will be eaten up by additional spending, and that is in fees, and that's a concern. I know that, President Kaler, you've done a great job holding fees down. And then the last lingering concern is related, I think everybody's already addressed it, to the graduate school fees and the professional education fees, and I look forward to continuing that conversation relative to that business model. I won't be supporting the budget today, but I just wanted to tell President Kaler that I appreciate the creativity in the approach. I think there's a lot of good things in this budget, and I know that you'll be working very hard going forward on identifying the things that I think I'm looking for within this.
Any further comments or questions? Regent Allen.
One kind of a philosophical comment, I think. We don't operate in a vacuum, obviously. We live in a society which, if you look back for several decades, there have been tremendous changes in the way we spend as consumers and the way we save, and therefore, as a small part of that, the way we finance education for our students. And as a result, this university and colleges and universities across the country have to find out how to balance their budgets, their income, their expenditures within that. So I think we need to expect that there will be creative ways proposed and tried out within budgets as we live with the continuing changes that society decides to have, some good, some bad. So, I have some concerns about the high aid, high tuition model, but I support the idea that we need to have some creative ideas tried out in order to try to fulfill our mission. And so I look at that and say, yeah, that's a little iffy, but we need to try some of those things. And it's essentially sort of the same thing that Regent Broad just said, except I come to a different conclusion and say I will support the budget because it needs that kind of thing in it.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge, I think it's really opportune timing that the chair of the Senate Higher Education Committee, Terry Bonoff, arrived. And we welcome you, Senator Bonoff, and you missed some of the very sincere thank yous for your committee and for the legislature's approval of a lot of the requests we made, the budgetary request, and you're here just in time for the vote. I'm sorry that you missed much of the discussion and some of the thank yous, but I think your administrative assistant will pass those on to you, but welcome.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, Regent Johnson.
Madam Chair, Mr. Fitzgerald, simple question. With the adoption of this budget, with the tuition freeze of 2 years, then we add the room and board, where does that benchmark us in the Big Ten as far as rankings for tuition, room and board?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, on room and board on the Twin Cities campus, remember there's never an average student, but for a resident undergraduate student living in a dorm, the University of Minnesota, I hate these numbers. We'd be 11th in the Big Ten on board and room. That doesn't work for a math guy. Only Wisconsin would be below us by $25, and they haven't acted yet. So we have traditionally been on room and board pretty much at a good place, bottom of the Big Ten. On Minnesota resident undergraduate tuition, after this freeze, I think we'll probably be in about the middle to the trending down a little in the middle of the Big Ten for Minnesota resident undergraduate.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to vote on the budget, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, the motion carries, and congratulations, President Kaler, Vice President Fitzenreiter, the many, many members of the teams who have helped put this budget together. It seems to be a remarkable budget, and to the superb job that you all have done.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. We're now on to a progress report on the Enterprise Systems Management Program, and I see President Kaler will introduce the topic.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you know, we are in the process of our Enterprise System Upgrade Program, which you approved last year. It will mean a complete and necessary upgrading of our human resources, student services, and finance systems. This is a project that will affect just about everyone who works for or is enrolled in the university. It's important that we keep you apprised as the project progresses. It is a very big deal. I'm grateful for the senior leaders who have taken on this massive undertaking, but I especially want to acknowledge Dean Bob Eldy, who took on his leadership role in this project when Tim Mulcahy retired. I asked Bob to step in, and being a great university citizen, he agreed. In his role as a college dean, he brings a different and important perspective and understanding to the needs of the end users. So to Dean Eldy, Vice Provost McMaster, and Vice Presidents Brown, Fitzenreiter, and Studham, That's the team. I extend my deepest thanks for this tough but necessary work that will make us a more efficient and effective organization. And now they will update us on where we stand. And Bob, I think you have the mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Kaler. Chair Cohen, members of the board. This morning we would like to present a status report of where this massive undertaking is bringing us, and I'm pleased to tell you that I think we're on a very good trajectory. We'll first just briefly review the nature of the Enterprise System Upgrade Program. We will then update you on the progress of each of the three major work streams, and then we'll close with a bit of a budget update and where we are with respect to an assessment of the quality of the program. So what is the Enterprise System Upgrade Program? Well, it's a very big undertaking. It's a big spend. It's a spend that you approved of $83.5 million. It's therefore equivalent to building a new building, such as the scale of the Physics Nano building and other major construction projects. But this is a construction project that's deep within the business processes of the university and the systems, the engine, if you will, the technological engine that runs that. If you note the icons to the right of this photo, what we built resembles what Vice President Studham has cleverly arranged. We built something that worked. We built it out of components and parts. Many of those components and parts were truly state-of-the-art, best in practice at the time. But as you can see, that sort of kludge-like cell phone with a camera and a monitor and so on really doesn't provide the kind of integration we need to be deft operators of a great institution like this. And now, as you all know, the industry standard is more like the smartphone on the right, where systems are truly integrated. We need that, and there are demands by the technology that we move in that direction. It's an integration of systems, the student system, the human resources system, the finance system. And it will provide technology to support our mission, stewardship of our investments, proper management and oversight, and planning at the level of the enterprise and decision-making. Well, why do this now? In a sense, we have little choice. First of all, we have compliance issues. Compliance continues to evolve, and the demand for data to support our compliance continues to expand. Our current highly customized systems are very costly to maintain. It's also the case that PeopleSoft as an enterprise has ceased to support version 8.9, which we currently run, the backbone of our system. So we're operating a bit with provisional support until we get this new system in place. It's also the case that there are serious advantages in that the current version of PeopleSoft, version 9.2, now has functionality that in many cases is on par or superior to customizations that we employed and developed on our own. And upgrading it will allow us to take advantage of these new technologies. So this is a really important opportunity to alter the business practices within the entire institution by indexing to these new and much more efficient and integrated strategies. So what are the goals of our program to upgrade this? I have to say this is much more, as I came into this, I thought, sure, I know how we upgrade. We get a new version of Microsoft Office and we plug it in and to our laptop and away we go. And we have a few new things to learn. This is a far more serious enterprise than anything like that. And in fact, what this will enable us to do is streamline and integrate our business processes, reduce the long-term support for the incredible number of customizations that we had to develop. We say it will build a foundation for access to operational and strategic data in ways we have never been able to realize, and therefore reduce institutional risk. So I think it is really an important step we are able to take, and it's a great effort indeed. Now, we're not doing this alone. We have a contractual relationship with a world-class implementation partner. This implementation partner is Cedar Creststone. They are veterans of managing upgrades to systems of the scale that we are encountering. They provide a very substantive management strategy for overseeing these processes. Their particular methodology is they refer to as Propel methodology, and I'd like you to spend just a moment looking at the graphic to the right of this image. It's comprised of 5 phases. The first phase is plan and discover. The second is analyze and design. The third is configure and develop. The fourth is test and train. And the fifth is deploy and optimize. And it's a very substantive, disciplined process through which we are taking the institution to accomplish our goals. So the governance of the program is illustrated here. Not illustrated on this slide is probably the most important part, and that's what's below. That is within the work streams, the hundreds of people from within the university and our consultants working together in amazing ways to examine every process, all of our business transactions, our student record transactions, in a way that is a complete fresh look at our enterprise. Those streams are 3 in number. We have a finance stream, which is overseen by the functional steering committee you see listed at the lower left. Feeding up into the student functional steering committee, we have another very engaged group, and finally the HRMS functional steering committee. Those come together after incredible deliberation and substantive work to report to the Integration Steering Committee to really force us to find wherever there are opportunities to integrate between these work streams and not maintain silos. And then that is then in turn comes up to us as the Executive Oversight Committee. We are aided tremendously in this by a talented program director, Andy Hill, who reports to us. So here's a graphic depiction of those work streams as these vertical elements, and the horizontal elements are the cross-cutting functional areas into which each of these work streams integrate. There will be a new portal. All of us at the university, students, faculty, staff, you as board members, will have a new portal into this university, a portal that will tremendously enhance our ability to work across different streams and components of the university. The engine behind all of this, under Vice President Studham's direction, is the technology. It's the software and it's the hardware. Even deeper behind it is the data structure that allows us to manage that data and report on queries that are both standard queries and customized queries that are needed at a moment's notice in order to, in real time, operate and steer the institution. And finally, at the very bottom of this slide, you'll see change management. This is going to be a very different university as a consequence of these, of the implementation of this enterprise system. And it's going to require all of us to operate on a daily manner in different ways. We have a very proactive change management strategy and great leadership. For that, we have a substantive communications team and training that will bring us all able to use these tools at the most optimal sort of way. So where are we in time? Well, this project began in 2012. Actually, there were precursors to this. The planning and the analysis that led to what it would take to reconfigure and reimagine the systems that operate the university preceded this for about 14 months. The project was kicked off in earnest in the fall of 2012. We're now, of course, in 2013, and you see the timeline on which we are working through the Propel process guided by Cedar Crestone. We're here with an initial status report to you today. We will be back as this project continues and at your request. You'll notice the date that we're all awaiting, and that is on the lower right side, the launching of the system. The launching of the system will be in the fall of 2014, calendar year 2014. The exact date is still being calibrated because all of these systems, the student system, the finance system, the HR system, are on somewhat different cycles throughout the academic year, throughout the fiscal year. So we're trying to find the optimum date when we can go live. In the meantime, there's an incredible amount of effort that will precede that, and there will be effort beyond that. It's very likely, and we have to understand that our expectations with respect to this, that not everything will be exactly perfect on the go-live date, and we're going to need to iterate and continue to do some revisions and modifications, hopefully minor, once we go live. So what are these three major systems, the work streams? As you know, this is an incredibly complicated and very large enterprise. It is and will be one of the largest enterprise systems installed by PeopleSoft. On the student side, just to highlight a few of those transactional numbers, more than $1 billion of tuition and fees are collected with this system. $490 million in federal financial aid processing. Big numbers, the numbers, 50 million student interactions with this system as they query the course catalog and register for courses and so on. Tremendous numbers of transactions, all operated under one system. Some details of where we are with the student system. There have been over 80 plan and discover sessions with more than 100 participants from all of the system's campuses. I'm very pleased to say also that the student system has adopted a very interesting strategy, and that is each campus, one vote. So on the decisions made for the student system, it is one vote for each campus, and a consensus is built. And this has led to amazing work within these work streams. Questions have been addressed and faced like we've never done before. There have been over 600 topics in the analyze and design phase that have been identified that need to be churned through. And over 58% of these are either in progress or completed to date. There's great involvement within each campus and between the campuses. And the teams are asking very critical questions. So the number of modifications that we had to devote to our current implementation of the enterprise system is being seriously looked at, and the numbers of modifications is being seriously downsized, because removing those modifications and going with the out-of-the-box version to the extent we can, the vanilla version, as we say, of PeopleSoft, will, over the long term, reduce our continued expenses in maintaining customizations. This is really an amazing process that our student system has been involved in. Similar progress has been made in our HR system. And again, you look at the top of this, over the top of these icons, the number of transactions maintained by the system throughout a given year. The numbers are really eye-popping kinds of numbers for each one of these systems. This HR system has, like the student system, gone a great distance down the pathway. There have been 67 of these plan and discover sessions, again with more than 100 participants system-wide. There have been really interesting adoptions proposed of the off-the-shelf implementations provided by PeopleSoft, so we will have new systems for managing time and labor, absence management, without increasing the budget or extending the timeline on these processes. We're seeing some real efficiencies. There is cross-fertilization between the payroll and finance, HR, reporting, and central administrative offices with respect to joint payroll accounting sessions. So I'm really pleased to report the incredible engagement of this work stream and the people in it as well. And then of those three work streams, the finance project, in a certain sense, this is as difficult to do as the others, except we're in a better position in that the enterprise financial system upgrade was done several years ago. And so this is more of a minor conversion. It's a true upgrade instead of a re-implementation of the entire system. So this is a system that in chronology has just kicked off. It's just kicked off in May and is on schedule and moving ahead very briskly now that the kickoff has occurred. Another important element that crosses all of these and counts on the integrity and the curation of data is the reporting and management out of our data sources. The project work streams are meeting to understand at a much deeper level how we have to have an integrated taxonomy of our data structures and systems. We need to be able to, as we say here, support enterprise-wide reporting of real-time data, and that real-time data needs to be in synchrony. There are other efforts here that are underpinning this whole effort. The enterprise data and reporting management effort is also coordinated with this. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, change management, communication, and training is going to be crucial for the adoption and efficient use of this system by the people of the university. So I'm very pleased with this process. This is using our existing structure, using both a top-down and a bottom-up approach that to date is looking very, very positive. We're rolling this out first to the deans. We're rolling it out to colleges. The lead change agents have met just a couple of days ago with the department heads of my college as a pilot to go to all of the colleges. We're having there will be long-term both inline support and online in-person training. And we intend to have kind of a buddy system where those working in a cluster of cubes can be trained to help each other so that the technology is not dependent on going to some place to receive the training, but that we develop a real community of experts who help each other in this process. So to the budget. The overall approved budget was $83.5 million, and I'm pleased to report that this budget is enabling us to proceed, and I think we're managing this budget in a very positive way. The overall budget without contingency is depicted on the left. You'll notice on the right we have a contingency of $7.6 million of the $83.5. But of the non-contingency budget, it is broken into the sectors that you see on the left. You might think that an enterprise system upgrade program is largely buying new software and hardware, but as you'll see by the slices on the left side of the diagram, the software and hardware acquisitions are actually 14% of the total budget, because the real work of this upgrade is within all of the business and record-keeping components of the institution. It's the engagement of those folks and the assistance of the consultants to manage this strategy. So the biggest spend, $33.8 million, is in staffing and backfill on the part of our people here at the University of Minnesota. And the second largest component is the $29 million contract with Cedar Crestone for their assistance in this process. I'm pleased on the right-hand side of this graph to report to you that as of the end of April, the scope of the project is 15% complete, and our expenditures against that scope are 14% of the base, or if you take into account the additional component in the contingency, it would be 13% of the contingency. An interesting component of our consultants' services is an independent person within their organization, an independent team that comes in as an auditor, if you will, and evaluates independently of their staff and our staff the progress we're making against our goals and against the timeline. And the second of those investigations was concluded just a month ago. And I'm pleased to tell you that according to their assessment, that coincides with our internal assessment, the project is healthy. In their terminology, it ranks green as opposed to yellow or red in the metaphor of stoplights, traffic control. And that's true on all aspects of the program status, the schedule, and the quality. There are clear areas of strength outlined on this slide, as you'll see, and these are conducted quarterly, so the next program quality review by their staff will be conducted in August of this year. Pleased also to report that their assessment provided the quotation that's at the bottom. And they said, in their experience at many institutions, many R1 universities like ours, the level of collaboration that exists here is something one often only reads about. They are very impressed with the way our people have come together to move forward this really important project. So our conclusion. I think we're seeing a really effective adoption of a new enterprise system and a new way of doing business. There's a very active governance structure throughout the institution that is working in collaboration with this experienced implementation partner. I think that bodes well for our success. The individual work streams are making great progress. The program budget is managed carefully, and the program is green, a green light. So with that, I conclude our report, and I'm joined by the Vice Presidents and Vice Provost who can help address questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Eldey, and all the others who've worked on this project, Vice President Studham and Brown and Fitzenreiter and Vice Provost McMaster, and all the other team members as you went down that chart, and those that weren't shown underneath too. So questions and comments from the board. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also thank all of you for the hard work on this. I'm excited to see things move forward in the coming years. Two things that I wanted to raise. The first one is I really appreciate the synergy that is being created with the staff and the faculty and the students moving forward. That is extremely important in a time of change and people get a little nervous and things like that. So that continued communication is absolutely, absolutely important. The second thing, and I know this has been voted on and is moving forward. So 40% of the spending goes to Cedar Crestone on this project, if I'm understanding this correctly. And so in my eyes, that seems like a very large number. And so I know you talked about them coming in and they do these meetings that kind of review and audit how we're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about what that money is being spent on, and perhaps it's simply their expertise? And I know they're impressed with us. Are we impressed with them?
Madam Chair, Regent Omari, thank you. And I may turn to my colleagues for their opinions as well. So this is not a consultant in the distance. These are people on the ground. They are jowl to jowl with our people every day in the cubes, particularly in Williamson Hall, and the entire, they're essentially the team. They're under contract with us, but they are with us on every minute detail, every decision. And they are the people who have deep experience with this version of PeopleSoft 9.2 and have deep experience with implementations at other institutions that are of the scale of complexity as us. So it's as if we've been able to import something of a dream team, I would suggest, to be our partners on a moment-to-moment basis.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I can add,
Okay.
Chair Cohen and Regent Amari. We have excellent staff here who work on this, maintaining this system year after year and day by day, and they've really helped us create and nurture the system we have. But we don't have the experience here to actually do this upgrade ourselves. So we needed to bring somebody in to help us with that. And Cedar Crestone's, that's a large chunk of change, and we wouldn't be able to do the project without them, though.
Regent McMillan, I see we have lots of interest here.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and I apologize in advance to my committee members as I kind of cross-examined Vice President Brown yesterday about competing priorities, and now I want to take that a step higher with the rest of your colleagues here. And really two questions. This business process optimization, whatever we want to call it, is essentially important. It's incredibly difficult. I applaud your commitment here, President Kaler and the senior team, to getting it done. But here's the two questions. One, and this is really about priorities, are there any priorities or resource issues standing in the way of doing this faster? Are we moving fast enough? Because that launch date at the end of 2014 seems like a long time away. And I fear the technology might change, which gets me to the second question, and that is, how do we know we picked the right horse to ride here with this software? So.
Which one of you is eager to tackle that?
Chair Cohen, Regent McMillan, just a quick comment on with respect to could we do it faster. I'll tell you, people are working so intensely. It's my judgment that it would be nearly impossible to move this at a faster rate. It's incredible what the daily and weekly and monthly workloads are. people are really working earnestly. So to scale it to an even faster go-live date, in my judgment, would be very, very challenging. I'll defer to other members here about perhaps Vice President Studham.
So, Regent McMillan and Chair Cohen, you know that moment when somebody asks a question, you get that flash sweat where you're like, oh no? Accelerating this, we would all love to do that. It's practically not possible. And the second question, which was, this is our racehorse, and are there other horses we should look at? At the beginning of this project, we did explore other options, and instead of the $80 million range, it moved us into the $100, $200 million range. Because this is our core infrastructure. It's really good core infrastructure as well. So we're upgrading a good core infrastructure. And we're going to see a lot of improvements out of that, but to change to another good core infrastructure would have cost us significantly more.
Regent Allen.
I have three questions. One, are we spending a great deal of time designing the data entry and data storage part of this? And the reason I ask that is so often we look at what we think we need and we put all the coding and the space and the data storage to do that, and then you say, gee, we don't have space to do that, or we didn't record that. Are we spending a great deal of design time thinking through exactly how we might want to use each piece of data? Or if we can't think of all of the ideas right now, which we probably can't, are we leaving space within the data storage mechanisms for adding data, adding the descriptions of data later on? I've seen so many projects, apparently go well, and all of a sudden you're beginning to use them and you say, gee, I wished we had added that feature in. And it's hard to do it sometimes. So are we thinking very thoroughly about that process up front?
Madam Chair, Regent Allen, yes, I mean, that is at the core of making this not a quarter miler, but a marathoner, so that the system is robust and has the capacity to be expandable and to be usable, and the data mineable for queries and questions we can imagine and those that we cannot yet imagine. So it's our goal to make it as robust as possible. And I think we're quite confident as a team that the system that will be implemented will have those features.
Second question is, in the design process, are we sitting down and brainstorming about kinds of reports we might want to get out and testing the system to see if the design of the data and the processes indeed would allow us to do that? Maybe they might be wild questions, but they can be a test of the system as we evaluate it.
Yes, Madam Chair, Regent Allen. Yes, there are prototypes being examined as we speak on some of these kinds of questions. And there will be an intense period of testing when the routine kind of queries will be tested, as well as some of those less routine kinds of queries. Testing is really a crucial part of that cycle. As I recall, it was the fourth of the components of that cycle.
And the last question, on one of your early slides, you had to implement and optimize. Optimize often has a slash, optimize and fix. And fixing things you didn't think of can be traumatic. From what you're seeing so far, is this a system, when we're done, that is going to lend itself to the ongoing changes we'll find we need to make later on?
Again, Madam Chair, Regent Allen, it's our firm belief that this is a system that has the robustness to provide just that.
Thank you.
Regent Larson.
I'd just like to provide a little advice based on my experience. About 25 years ago, I was given responsibility to turn one of our businesses into a totally global business. It had been very decentralized up until that point. And so every country had some different process. And I had to be a tyrant in order to say, no damn customization. Because everybody wanted some little different thing. And even though, the business was essentially the same from one country to the next, not perfectly that way, but essentially.
I had to come down with a heavy hammer in order to tell people not only no, but hell no. And this organization also tends to be fairly decentralized, so that's my only caution to you, or you could go completely nuts. And a lot of the expected synergy that and efficiencies that you are expecting could start to dissipate. So, for what it's worth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Regent Beeson.
Madam Chair, Regent Larson actually asked the same question about customization and that tension between users who want individualized management reports, spreadsheets, and the need for the system to work together as a integrated sort of system.
Okay, Regent Broad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice President Studham, last time I asked you what keeps you up at night as Chief Technology Officer, and I'm not going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you a different layer of it. When you look back to the PeopleSoft, I heard, I've heard along the way lots of concerns over what it was, how it was implemented, how it worked, things like that. So my question to you is, what are people going to say about this upgrade 10 years from now?
Good. Thank you for asking 10 years from now. This will be so Chair Cohen, Regent Broad, this will be a foundational piece of work for the university. This system, when it goes in, anytime you put one of these in, there's a little stress. But 10 years from now, we'll have a integrated, more mainstream system. We have a lot of paper processes. Vice President Brown yesterday briefed the HR subcommittee on a million data entries via paper for when I want to take vacation, I fill out a piece of paper and somebody manually enters that in. After this system, I can just go enter that in myself. Right? This will be a nice foundational piece, not only for our business process optimization, but also for our reporting. I mean, the day we turn it on, are the reports going to run like clockwork? No, but 10 years from now, this is going to be that foundation that we all look back on and go, that was what drove that change.
It's easy to identify what the cost of implementation and the cost of this project is, and it's obviously a big number. But what are I assume that you have quantified the cost of not doing it and the cost benefits of the optimization that we're going to get out of it, and how those things offset each other.
Let me take
I think we can give.
Yes.
Chair Cohen, Regent Broad, and members of the board, just to use a metaphor, when you have a drain in your house and it runs clearly, and then it starts to slow down, you can keep using it, but eventually it just clogs up and you can't get anything done. You can't use it correctly. And I think that's what we're going to be facing with this system if we had not made this change. We had 1 million paper entries in human resources for time card entries, vacation, leave entries, and so forth. As time goes on and we have more students working and so forth, we have more of those and more of those. That clogs the system. We just can't get anything done. And ultimately, in human resources, the number one priority is to get the payroll out every 2 weeks. And if we can't do that, obviously, our system comes to a grinding halt. So, we needed to get the system. And so when you look about the cost, it's kind of that same analysis. If you don't repair the drain at home, you have a greater cost down the road to ensure that you have a working drain. You probably have to get new parts, new replacement, where if you keep it going as you go along and get the new parts as you need them, you have less expense. It's kind of that kind of analysis, I believe.
Okay. Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Number of comments. I think many of us sitting around this board table can hear the description of this, but it's quite frankly, I think, difficult for all of us to conceive and really understand the complexity of this installation. The simplest point about what happens if we don't do it is there's all sorts of technical analysis, but the reality is if we don't do it, we can't get the work done. We absolutely have to make these changes to keep up with the various elements of the work that govern day-to-day activity. We went through, within at least a couple of our term on the board, the major finance installation of the PeopleSoft process the first time. And we put our best effort known at a time when the technology wasn't as far advanced as it is now. I think we probably bent over too far on the customization side. Regent Larson talked earlier about the balance, what I would call the balance between customization and making it workable. And when we ended up with 16-digit item numbers that had to describe, that had to be coded in for everything, we were driving people crazy in the organization. A number of my colleagues in healthcare have gone through the change of implementing medical record systems, automated medical record systems in their organizations. The most common statement is something like, it was pure hell to go through the period of time and you couldn't pry it out of our hands today. And that's where we'll be with this point once we get through this process. The key to this process is the decision to bring this consulting group in. I mean, I'm assuming we've selected the right people. But what you're doing is taking a people who have gone through a number of installations. And unfortunately, the complexity of these products doesn't allow us to rely on the vendor for that. You kind of have to get that from somebody else. And what we're getting, from what I understand, is really the best practices of other installations being applied to our installation and to solving our problems and creating a base for adaptability without being so customized that we've made it impossible to work. So I'm pleased to hear the report and the progress. I have little understanding of actually what's going on. I think the right elements are in place to assure a high probability of success, and I'm encouraged by our progress in our process.
All right. Thank you, Regent Frobenius, and I think that's a good note to end the discussion on this system. And we will look forward to the next report. I think it will be sometime in the fall or winter or whatever, whenever you feel it's timely and when we think we need it. So good luck on what you're doing, and thank you for the reporting. All right, and now we will review results on the benchmarking analysis, and Vice President Fitzenreiter, you seem to be at the table at the appropriate moment, and Ms. Yeager from Huron Consulting, and President Kaler will say a few introductory remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This ESOP upgrade report was really almost the perfect introduction to this one. It gives you an idea of the magnitude of the task we have in front of us to bring operational excellence to the University of Minnesota. It gives you an idea of the timescale that it takes to affect change on the scale that we need to do it. For this section, as you know, members of the legislature asked us to conduct an external administrative services benchmarking and diagnostic study, and that's consistent with our operational excellence themes. It has three primary goals. One is to identify and determine the scale of and prioritize opportunities for improvement in the four core administrative functional areas of finance, procurement, human resources, and information technology. Secondly, to describe primary factors such as technology, organizational structure, and service delivery approach, which may currently impact performance in each area. And finally, to highlight peer and leading practices which have applicability to the university. We engaged Huron Consulting Services of Chicago, a very experienced firm, to perform the study, and we have submitted it to the legislature. Vice President Fitzenreiter is joined by colleagues from Huron, including Laura Yeager, and they will detail the report and answer our questions. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello and welcome, and we're eager to hear your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, President Kaler, and thank you, Board of Regents. It's a pleasure to be here. I know many of you just received this report just a little over 24 hours ago, and it's a lot to digest, so I thought I would start by giving a brief synopsis of, when you sum it all up, what did we find, and then I'll walk you through some elements of our executive summary and leave ample time for comments and questions. Relative to the university's total expenditures and total employees, the central administrative functions that were included in the scope of our work were in line with the university's peer institutions. The university was not an outlier in any of the four function areas. There was strengths identified in every function. There were also opportunities identified in every function. And we'll walk through a few examples of those when we go through the executive summary. The greatest opportunity, though, lies in the university rethinking its whole administrative service model. And what I mean by that is much of the administrative activity and cost currently takes place in the academic units and the non-academic support units. And this was a good foundation from which to start an analysis and a study, but as we'll talk through, the bigger impact in terms of operational effectiveness and efficiencies will involve more engagement with the academic stakeholders and rethinking that business model and providing services to the academic community. In our report, we start out by highlighting that the challenges that are taking place across the nation. The University of Minnesota is certainly not unique in terms of experiencing a very unprecedented time of change and pressures, and you all are already in the midst of undertaking many initiatives to address these. Reduced funds from state and federal sources, as well as more pressures from families being able to afford the tuition to go to institutions like the University of Minnesota. Increased competition for students, also being able to take advantage of the technology and evolution of things that can be done to really innovate and grow and expand your education and your research platform. The University of Minnesota has embraced many of these initiatives and has also been very supportive in working to provide us with the information we needed to conduct the study in a very short period of time. We're appreciative of the opportunity to work with you all. As President Kaler mentioned, we looked at 4 primary functional areas: finance, procurement, human resources, and information technology, with those 3 goals. One is to identify the opportunity for improving operational efficiencies and effectiveness. For highlighting which factors really contribute the most to that, we talked about organizational structural issues as well as technology and other things that can really help enable more efficiencies and effectiveness. And then highlighted the peer institutions and leading practices that we felt were most relevant to the University of Minnesota at this time. Our approach, we did do this in a 12-week period. We worked with a lot of data from the university, as well as interviews across the central and administrative departments across several of the non-academic units. We conducted a survey to the extent that we couldn't get information from the human resource systems on information to do our best to get some indication of administrative activities taking place beyond the central units. We also, as I mentioned, looked at external sources, both these customized peer benchmarking surveys, as well as some additional external research and publicly available databases that were helpful as part of this review. Wanted to provide a little context just in terms of benchmarking in higher education. We have worked with nearly all of the large research universities who are tackling these issues in different ways and shapes and forms, and oftentimes are asked to do some targeted benchmarking activities. And it often is a challenge because so many universities are structured differently in the way they provide administrative services. And as I mentioned before, so much of that cost and activity does take place in the academic units and the non-academic support units, where you don't have a clear indication of how much time folks may be spending on human resources versus finance versus procurement activities. Oftentimes, those activities might be performed by a single individual with a very general job classification. So when we went and conducted the study, we felt we get a pretty good indication of comparing central levels, staffing levels. To some degree, we were able to determine the distributed levels as well, but often many of the peers responded back with caveats in terms of this is our best guess, or plus or minus a 25% error rate. So wanted to put that into perspective. I think it always is a helpful reference point, but also keep in mind that nearly all of the peer institutions that we compared you against are also in the midst of studying themselves, looking to improve. So just because you're within range doesn't necessarily mean that there's no opportunity. And as we worked with the university to talk through our recommendations, they certainly embraced that concept. The university has many foundations of strength that we found both from an enterprise perspective as well as in these functional areas. You just heard about the enterprise technology initiatives that are taking place in these several of these core functions, HR and finance and procurement. There's a strong model, financial model. The Responsibility Center management model is University of Minnesota was one of the first large research universities to adopt that back in the late 1990s. Beginning to change reporting structures that begin to enable the central units to carry more influence in standardizing business processes and policies and practices is a step in the right direction. There are many major initiatives that I mentioned, and this gives you a snapshot of those that are taking place across these four primary areas in finance, procurement, HR, and IT. So there are no shortage of activities and initiatives and a significant amount of resources and tension, oftentimes with folks that are also doing their day jobs. So it is pretty remarkable in terms of the level of effort, and many of these do really provide an important foundation from which the university can build on improving its operational and effectiveness and efficiency. I'm going to give a brief overview of each of the four areas in terms of the strengths and opportunities. In finance, I think back in 2007, the university began to consolidate a lot of the transactional activity that was taking place in the academic units and non-academic support units, and developed a cluster model or a service center model where you could concentrate these activities with fewer number of folks with specialized attention on these areas. That has resulted in significant efficiencies for the university. However, we recommend that the university take that a step further and still ensure that standardized performance measures, practices are taking place within those distributed units. While there's a dotted line reporting relationship, that doesn't necessarily carry a full mandate in terms of the way business processes and practices need to be performed. There are other activities such as financial reporting, and as you saw in ESEP, that's going to be a key focus of the upgrade, is to be able to provide better reporting. Now think about what the service delivery model should be for that. Should we still have that be fragmented across many of the academic units and non-academic units, or should we consider consolidating some of those resources and have some real expertise built in as well to provide that service? In the procurement area, this was an area we found to have a lot of strengths in its core. There's been investment in technology and tools, and relative to other institutions, the staffing was significantly lower in the central office, but the infrastructure in terms of these tools and contracts and those types of things really were of leading practice. The key areas that we felt could require improvement included the invoicing practices are still very distributed across the local and non-academic support units. Accounts payable function is still very manual and doesn't have, could be better aligned with the procurement process and function. And the travel and expense process is still a very manual, distributed process. And thinking about automation in ways that could drive a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness. Human resources is an area where there is a lot of foundational work that's being done. A strategic plan was done about a year ago, which is really beginning to set the stage for being able to better manage the workforce. Several areas and that's going to be a very strong foundation from which the university to move forward. The job classification study that you saw on the earlier chart too is going to be really important to be able to have the university better identify the roles and functions that individuals play across, central school as well as that departmental level. Some of the areas we identified for opportunities is really looking and evaluating at all of the programs and services that the human resources provides. We found circumstances where there may not be as much of attention in some areas and perhaps more resources deployed to other areas that may not be as high a priority for the institution at this time. So really looking at the full spectrum of services that are provided not only at this center but also in the departments and thinking about a better service model for that. For example, the data entry process, which Regent Allen asked a question in the last presentation about, is what are we doing about the data entry? Currently, there are close to 250 people throughout the university that have access to enter HR information into the system. So, is that the best model? Is there another way to think about how we can better align that in a way that we can drive higher levels of quality, higher levels of data integrity? So those are kinds of things that the university can really do now while it's going through these foundational projects to determine how to best capitalize on that activity and determine how that can drive resources to higher priority functions and missions of the institution. And last, in the IT area, there has been a lot of work in significant progress in the what we'll call infrastructure consolidation. What we mean by that is there's lots of servers, data centers, those are distributed across the university, and there has been a lot of progress in terms of consolidating those activities and those services. There's also been a lot of work in terms of getting to a common email system. And although these things sound very basic, we've been working with another university that still has over 70 email systems. So we applaud the university for being able to be efficient and effective in some of these common good services. Areas for opportunity, one of the initiatives that's underway is consolidating the services for desktop support. There's a significant amount of activity and effort that's distributed across the university, and the IT function is currently underway in terms of consolidating and getting some very good success with that. But it's kind of happening at one department at a time, one unit at a time. The more the institution can progress in that area, the more there'll be, higher consistent levels of service that can be provided to users and more efficiencies and effectiveness that can be gained of that. There's also a significant amount of activity and investments in different pockets of the organization around IT, and while the university has established a stronger governance model for this, making sure that that governance also can look at those investments and best prioritize those in a way that can really drive towards the university's highest priorities. So I mentioned earlier on that that looking at the taking a step back and looking at this more from an enterprise perspective, you'll see that currently where resources are deployed from an administrative perspective, the gold slice there represents the resources that, the percentage of resources that are dedicated to the central administrative functions. The next shows the percentage of resources that are dedicated to the non-collegiate support functions. The third shows the amount of resources that are dedicated in those academic units within the Twin Cities campus, and then those that are in the system campuses. So particularly in finance, procurement, and in the human resource function, here's where you'll see that more than half or nearly half the activity is taking place out in the local units themselves. This is not uncommon. As I mentioned, nearly all large research universities have kind of grown up this way. But as we'll talk about, there is movement towards looking at this model to determine how you can drive better efficiency and cost savings from considering a new model. Just a couple comments. This just gives a little bit of perspective on the, why this tends to happen in institutions of higher education. Oftentimes, we do see when the universities start rationalizing the central level resources, but departments have autonomy to be able to, hire resources, et cetera. They start to kind of build stronger administrative functions in their particular department. So that often contributes to the state that there are definitely specialized needs. Your academic health center, no question, has specialized needs. Your research community has specialized needs. But as each department sort of determines sort of how to best provide support, it makes it more challenging to be able to provide, services to those units. What we found here is, as a result, not only here at the Minnesota, but at other institutions as well, you often find, again, duplication of resources, gaps that are large variation in terms of the level of resources and the number of resources, not necessarily based on the amount of services that are required, but based on the funding or the amount that each of the individual departments can afford. So where does the university begin in terms of really taking a step back and thinking about its service delivery model? We highlighted kind of 4 fundamental things. First of all, determining what services the university should provide and at what level of the organization, at the central, at the school, at the non-academic support units, or at the local level. There should be probably pockets in all of those areas, but being more strategic and thoughtful in terms of where is the best place to do that. Defining what service levels that would meet the customer's needs. Role definition, role clarity, that's an area that HR is spending a lot of time on now, but that really does provide a strong foundation to make sure that if administrative activities are distributed among the center and the school and the department, making sure there's still efficiencies when there's clear role definitions and accountability, and having that ability to measure performance. The university is measuring its metrics in some areas, hasn't made as much progress in others, but trying to determine what are those most important metrics and can we deploy our systems in a way that we can be able to measure that. This gives you an indication of, again, how you look at where administrative services might be contributed. Looking at that from a localized level, looking at it just from still remaining in a localized level, but being able to provide standardization across that. Many institutions are adopting shared services models, which are basically concentrating certain types of functions that highly transactional, doesn't require specialized expertise to be able to drive more efficiencies and effectiveness. The continuum will vary, depending on the services, and we provided some examples of what the university has already done with respect to centralizing some of the administrative services, and provide some examples of what some of the next set of services that the university should consider adopting, particularly in light of its enterprise system upgrade. Here we provide some examples of some institutions that are taking steps towards implementing shared services models in these various functions. These institutions have been at it for a number of years and are still in the process of implementing these activities. So this kind of change is not easy, but these institutions found very necessary in order to make efficient and effective use of resources. So finally, we provided some recommendations in terms of how the university may want to consider moving forward. There are a lot of information and a lot of recommendations in this report. At the same time, the university has a lot of initiatives underway and doesn't necessarily have capacity to do everything. But looking at the report and its recommendations, and in particular, some of the foundational things that would really drive some structural changes that will ultimately lead to higher levels of efficiencies and effectiveness. This broader vision around enterprise services, that while it may take time to actually go through a process to implement it. Establishing that vision, that direction you want to go, will make sure that the incremental changes that happen across these various areas are going to be contributing to that longer-term model and vision. Ultimately, then, evaluating, prioritizing opportunities, and involving more stakeholders. We did not have an opportunity to engage with faculty and as staff out in the local, and at the end of the day, those are the customers, and it's important that they too have some ability to provide feedback in terms of how to best change this business model that will really benefit the enterprise and allow more resources to be dedicated to your mission activities. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that report. I imagine there's some comments, questions. We will limit the discussion somewhat because we're in a time schedule here, but we do have time for a few questions or comments. So, Regent Broad.
And I'm thinking about, what is trendy versus what is necessary. And so from your experience, how best do large organizations determine what is trendy versus what works long term? And I'm thinking about this in the framework of decentralized versus centralized. It was trendy to decentralize, and because of all these universities have done that, and now it seems to be trendy to centralize. So how do we determine what's best?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Regent Broad. I would say this trend is really driven because of the burning platform and need to change because of the constraint on resources. And so I would say that for these institutions that are moving towards these different service delivery models, they're in it for the long haul. I mean, it really has been resulting in greater levels of efficiencies, effectiveness, resources. To be candid, I think the institutions that are implementing these models, though, do struggle with, did it really result in reducing the number of resources? So if we're going to establish financial clusters or a financial service center model, did we really take the folks from the departments and be able to, deploy them on, did they just get redeployed on other activities, or did we really make rationalized resources that are performing these functions? That's the hardest part of going through this change process. But so there might be more efficient, effective service being performed, but how much is that going to really translate into cost savings?
Okay, thank you. Regent Frobenius.
My comments first have to be put in a point that I received your report by email Friday or Wednesday afternoon on the way to these meetings, and have been buried in these meetings since and have not had the foggiest or had the moment to even glance at it. So I have no idea what's in the report other than the summary you've given us today. I'm a great fan of benchmarking. I've struggled with it in higher education because it's really hard to get data that is truly comparable data. But I want to pose a part of the process. I mean, what you're talking about here is review of some key support processes, and the fact that, I believe the university must operate in a sort of a continuous improvement process on these selected key areas. There's a missing element, and what I'm searching for is whether anybody else in higher education is making any progress in what I call the missing element. The question of distribution or centralization of various services is a secondary question to me in terms of the sort of end question is, what is the University of Minnesota's cost to produce an educated physician, a veterinarian, a pharmacist, a nurse, a history major, a biostatistician? And it gets at what you start to use is how you manage how do you measure the performance of the School of Public Health and its various sub-elements, and the medical school and all that. We tend to do that we tend not to apply financial parameters to that. And a healthcare background has suggested to me as to once we started looking about what does it cost to treat a full diagnosis in a certain kind of way, using the inputs from a variety of people. Then you begin to attack really the issue of how the costs are going to be dealt with. And you change people's point of view of looking at it. How can we do that? Is anybody making any progress in getting to that kind of analysis in higher education?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Regent Frobius. Let me start with the University of Minnesota and the challenges, and then as well as what we see across the landscape. The job classification study will certainly be able to lay a stronger foundation from which you could determine roles and ultimately functions that people are performing. Whether it gets down to that level of detail in terms of determining how much it takes to hire somebody or to do that type of activity may still not, but at least it'll be a better, stronger starting point for that information. The way that we began to get at some of that information is through a survey process and an activity-based survey to find out how much people are spending their time. And there still may be some element of that because you're still going to have some generalists that are going to be spending portions of their time on the activities that you mentioned. There has been some targeted benchmarking surveys that have been trying to get at, comparing some of this data, but they have been very challenged to be able to. I think some institutions have been able to try to diagnose and cost themselves a bit in certain priority areas, that they really make those efforts through the same mechanism I'm talking about, through surveying efforts, through sampling, and then extrapolating to make some estimates of what it may cost at a broad level, but very few and far between, and there's not a lot of, if any, benchmarking data that really gets at a broad set of benchmarks that are more process-oriented. The cost to, do a paycheck, or the cost to hire an employee.
Okay, thank you. We're going to end the discussion with Regent Allen. I hope you have a brief comment or question, and then President Kaler.
I'll be very brief. I think we want to look at that question of centralization versus decentralization very carefully. I think there's a real difference in centralizing the development of the systems we use and the centralization of the authority to use them and to put in data. I think those are two very different aspects of the project, and we need to be careful we don't suddenly move to centralization that's counterproductive.
Okay. Regent Beeson, as long as Regent Allen was so brief, you can make another brief comment, and then President Kaler.
Chair, to the presenter, are there functions that tend to work better under the centralized model versus the shared services model or the standardized model? I mean, between finance and HR, in your experience, are some best suited to one or the other model?
Yeah, I would actually, in our slide here in our report, a lot of the top of the graph there shows, as you're going through that evaluation process, processes that we typically see being conducted are those ones, at the central level, are those that are in a shared services environment, are those that are the high transaction-oriented functions that don't require a lot of special expertise, or things like benefits or compensation is something that has to be distributed to some degree, but having some more expertise available to folks to make sure that those are some broad standards and continuity around the enterprise is of assistance. So the university has, particularly in the finance and procurement areas, aligns with practice or leading practices in terms of the types of things you want to have centralized. IT is in the area in our report you'll see that has been trending towards moving towards more centralization in some areas, yet doing it in a way that you can build that track record of strong service and ability to, that's what the departments are often most concerned about. If you take my resources, how will I make sure I'm still going to get the same levels of services? So by demonstrating that strong track record of service, hopefully gives these some of the central units more ability to make that change more swiftly across the organization.
Thank you, Ms. Yeager, and thank you for the report. And then the concluding remarks on this topic, President Kaler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Yeager. It really is a pleasure to have someone knowledgeable talk about the University of Minnesota administration rather than having to listen to uninformed criticism. So I'm really grateful for you being here. I particularly value your observation that we're not an outlier in relationship to our peers. We clearly have a great deal of opportunity in front of us, and I particularly am appreciative of you noting the many activities that we have ongoing to get better, and we look forward to following up with you and the suggestions that you've made. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And now we'll conclude the meeting with committee reports. And so, report of the Finance Committee, Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under action items, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the resolution related to issuance of debt for state-supported biomedical facilities. I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Under the consent report, the committee unanimously recommends approval of the consent report, including the purchases of goods and services over $1 million. I move its approval.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
The committee discussed and received significant information on the university tax compliance activities and programs, which provided an overview of upcoming and ongoing and developing tax changes impacting the university, as well as the summary of the tax environment for colleges and universities. We also received information on the quarterly investment advisory committee update, on our asset management report on a quarterly basis, the debt management advisory committee report, quarterly purchasing reports, and a semi-annual management report. Lastly, relative to the topic just previously presented, I offer the services of the Finance Committee to take additional roles and hopefully whatever roles might be helpful in working with the information and recommendations of the Huron report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Regent Beeson, the Audit Committee.
Madam Chair, the committee discussed and received information on the internal audit plan for 2014. We also discussed the internal audit update. Third, we reviewed the risk profile of university operations, which provided an overview of risks associated with creating and sustaining a physical environment and service culture that supports the advances the teaching, research, and outreach missions of the university. Finally, we reviewed one information item related to the semi-annual controller's report, Madam Chair.
Okay. The report of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, Regent Simmons.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, the committee took action on a proposed policy change we had heard at a previous meeting, and we unanimously recommend approval of proposed changes to the Board of Regent policy on tuition and fees. I move adoption of the revised policy.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. On our consent report, there were a number of program changes with new academic programs, additions to programs, some deletions of programs, and discontinuations of programs. And we particularly noted some very interesting and worthy joint degree programs that we think may offer further differentiation for the university and also help prepare our graduates well for the workplace. I move adoption of the consent report.
And is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And we had two non-action items that involve very important reports and very good discussion among the committee. And I'd encourage you to look at the materials that were circulated for these. One was an update on student mental health trends and services. We're particularly pleased to see the proactive stance taken at Boynton to try to get ahead of the curve, if you will, and treat mental health disorders and addiction disorders as more of a public health concern, not just a crisis intervention. We also heard a thorough report on the university's efforts at internationalization and learned the results of the external review of the Global Programs and Strategy Alliance, which is the central international office for the university system. Again, it was a very well put together report that demonstrated the strategic approach the university is taking to internationalizing our campuses and also getting our students out into the world. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Regent Johnson, the report on the Facilities and Operations Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 5 action items. The first being the University of Minnesota Campus Master Plan. The committee voted unanimously to recommend the approval of the master plan. I move its approval.
A second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Secondly, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the schematic plans for the UMD campus utility building. I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Madam Chair, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the schematic plans for the microbiology research facility on the Twin Cities campus. I move its approval.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Fourthly, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the schematic plans for the Glen Sheen, June 20th, 2012 water damage and cleanup at the Duluth campus. I move its approval.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Finally, the University of Minnesota Landscape Arboretum Master Plan update. We voted unanimously to recommend approval of this plan. I move its approval.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Regent Johnson, I'm glad you don't have a 6th item. I'm beginning to sound like a broken record here. All right, the rest of your report.
Very briefly, Madam Chair, non-action items. The committee received information on the land care salt and sand storage building in the Twin Cities campus. Secondly, the Kaltoff Hall pedestrian deck removal. And thirdly, the capital planning and project management semi-annual project report. Madam Chair and members, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. And now a report of the Faculty and Staff Affairs Committee, Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can see all of you, but you can't see me. This is pretty good. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the new policy on safety of minors. I move adoption of the policy.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
The committee also unanimously recommends approval of the collective bargaining agreement between the University of Minnesota and University Education Association faculty on the Duluth and Crookston campuses. I move adoption of the collective bargaining agreement.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
And I'll point out, Madam Chair and members of the board, we had a very good discussion on recognizing merit in the compensation scheme for our faculty. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the revised consent report, which includes appointment of 3 deans and appointment of the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum Foundation trustees and conferral of tenure for new outside hires. I move adoption of the revised consent report.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. On non-action items, I think the board will be pleased that we have been attending in the committee to some board priority as well as administration priority items, including looking at HR metrics at the university. We had a very good presentation and discussion on a new framework of applied metrics and analysis, and we're pleased that the administration engaged the committee in what we need to see to try to understand our role in overseeing HR. Second, we had a report on Human Resources Management System Upgrade Project that included the status project budget and, again, the metrics. Regent McMillan really found that all very exciting, I'll be pleased to tell you. And finally, we had another important annual report that we receive, and that is on the university's health and wellness programs. And this time it was particularly interesting because we not only looked at trend data and creative implementation that's going on, but how the university and U-Plan specifically are responding to proactively the changes we anticipate from the Affordable Care Act. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Simmons, and thank you for sticking with us for 3 hours on the phone. That's not an easy proposition, but you did get to see us.
I got to see you. It was a great, great movie.
The report of the Litigation Review Committee is that committee did not meet this month. Is there any old business? Any new business?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before we conclude, I think it appropriate that we thank you as being our chair the past 2 years, and Regent Larson had to leave for another commitment, but I would like to thank you as my classmate, if you will. We were elected at the same time and re-elected, and just pleased at the job and performance and working with you in a collaborative way, and I want to thank you for that. And I'd be amiss if I didn't. Regent Beeson can speak for himself, but I thank the board for your consideration for a leadership position in the next couple of years, and look forward to working with each of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Regent Johnson, and congratulations both to Regent Beeson and Regent Johnson. And I must say I have enjoyed my term as chair enormously. It's been a great honor and pleasure to serve the university. And one of the things that has stood out the most for me has been the cooperation and the support that I have gotten from each of you as board members. So thank you very, very much. In addition, my other great pleasure in being the chair was being able to work so closely with President Kaler in his first 2 years. And now the meeting is adjourned.